Managing a golf course isn't that hard. There's an easy way to play the hole and there's a difficult way to play the hole. And sometimes they're really trying to seduce you into the difficult way to play the hole. And then it requires discipline to recognize which is the smartest way to play the hole. I never hit shots parallel to trouble unless I have to. Let's say it's a 450-yard par 4, and I got a bunker on the right and a bunker on the left. Regardless of the yardage that those bunkers are at, I'm going to try to never be equidistant with both of those bunkers. I want to be either past them or short of them. That way I'm taking trouble out of play. And it becomes pretty easy to help someone recognize what a safe route is throughout the hole. Sometimes you have to take chances, and when that occurs, that's where you have to be on your game. But for the most part, there's a real safe way to play just about any hole.
Golf Smarter number 801 is brought to you by dynamicgolfers.com/golfsmarter. How to get more power out of your golf swing by not swinging hard. As we welcome back Jim Venetos.
This is Golf Smarter, sharing stories, tips, and insights from great golf minds to help you lower your score and raise your golf IQ. Here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter podcast, Jim.
Hi, Fred. Thank you for having me.
It's so great to talk to you again. It's been a while. I was actually going through my list of episodes, and this is your 10th appearance on Golf Smarter, but it's been since July of 2018, the last time you were on. So we haven't had a chance to catch up in a while.
Well, I've been very busy since then.
Tell me, what's going on with the Jim Venetos Golf Academy.com?
Well, I rebuilt my school. I improved the message, and I am continuing to help golfers get much better all through remote training.
And it's always been remote training, this what you've been doing in the last year and a half, 2 years?
Last 7 years. Yep. 7 years of remote training and about 20 years before that of all in-person teaching. So that's something that I learned through the 7 years of teaching remotely. I learned how to improve my message to make sure I can get all my students to do that wonderful thing of staying still.
And it must be a real challenge for a golf instructor to not have hands-on with your student.
Well, I tell you, I can understand why you would say that, but it's not so difficult for me because I have a template. I have a form. And it's through that template and form that I put the golfer into that then the golfer and I get on the same page. In traditional golf instruction, there's a lot of individual instruction per each individual golfer. How they say that there is no universal swing in traditional golf. They say that the golfer must go find his swing for his or her swing for his or her body type. But I have discovered, and I believe in a universal swing that applies to all body types. I think our body type is human, and I teach a system that arranges the body so that you can create really high quality golf swings.
But you're incredibly articulate and passionate about what you're doing. And so I would think over those 7 years, you've really been able to fine tune your message so that you can break it down for a beginner, a high handicapper, a low handicapper, to get them to be where you are on what you call your universal swing.
Yes. My goal is to make my students autonomous. One of the interesting things about golf is you really can't have a coach. You have to go play and you can't get advice. It's against the rules if you get advice unless it's from your caddy. So golf, being the individual and independent game that it is, I think it's very important for golfers to be autonomous. I don't want golfers to need me. I have one student that references me and says, he's like a doctor that doesn't want to see you again. I want you to be healthy. I want you to play good golf. I want you to go out and be satisfied with your round and the game that you play. And what I want to hear from you is, hey, Jim, I won this tournament, or I made a hole-in-one the other day. And in order to do that, I try and build golfers with a comprehensive understanding of not only the swing that I teach, but yeah, I help them to build a comprehensive game that's balanced between their long game, their short game, their putting game, their strategy and course management. I teach them how to prepare, how to build their swing, how to fix themselves if they have a mistake, if they start to struggle. And that's all based on this format, this template that I'm referencing. If you have a format and template, you have an opportunity to fix yourself, as opposed to a lot of traditional instruction. To me, sounds like a lot of random and intangible ideas. I try and lay down just a concrete reality of presetting the in the setup position, presetting the movements for the swing so that you can create the highest quality dynamics of your swing. In the long game and short game, it creates a shallow, circular, and descending swing path. And for your putting game, it creates a circular and ascending swing path. And that's all done through the setup position and then a focus on stillness during the swing.
I'm not here to teach anything. I'm here to listen and to ask a lot of questions, and hopefully people will listen to it. But it is remote, in a common sense of being just audio most of the time. And I'm wondering how you teach course management remotely.
Sure. Well, I do a few things. I actually have some videos where I will strategize a particular hole and describe how to play that hole, but also it's through common sense. So every golfer should build a certain set of skills so that they can go out and play. And then once you get to the course, you should stay within that skill set as you manage your way around the course. So weren't you a diver? Wasn't that what was it that you did?
Well, I never did anything. I never compete. My brother was a competitive diver in high school, but I've never played any sport competitively.
Okay, but
ever.
You've done.
I did Little League for 2 years, and that was it.
Well, I'll use the reference of diving. If you could only do a single backflip, you wouldn't go out and try and do a triple backflip. I find that lots of golfers will go out to a golf course, and because they see a PGA Tour player hit a shot, they try to do that triple backflip. And then what you start to have is the golfer playing outside of his skill set. And so one of the first things that you have to do in strategy and course management is simply just recognize what your skill set is. I don't hit any shots that I don't have. Now, I happen to have a lot of shots because of the years and the level that I played at, but I build those shots on the range. And so that's something that I teach my students to do. We build a comprehensive set of skills so that when you get to the course and you look down a fairway, it becomes something, well, where would I like to hit it? And then what shots do I have that I can consistently play? Managing a golf course itself, if you could have the skill of hitting the ball perfectly, managing a golf course isn't that hard. Because a golf course designer gives you multiple routes down any hole. There's an easy way to play the hole and there's a difficult way to play the hole. And sometimes, like a designer like Pete Dye, they're really trying to seduce you into the difficult way to play the hole. And then it requires discipline to recognize which is the smartest way to play the hole. But it could be as simple as this. For example, with strategy and course management, I never hit shots parallel to trouble unless I have to. So if I got a fairway, let's say it's a par 4, 450-yard par 4, and I got a bunker on the right and a bunker on the left, regardless of the yardage that those bunkers are at, I'm going to try to never be equidistant with both of those bunkers. I want to be either past them or short of them. That way I'm taking trouble out of play. And then you can apply that to all kinds of hazards, and then you start recognizing about playing the fat side of the hole and the fat side of the fairway. And it becomes pretty easy to help someone at least recognize what a safe route is throughout the hole. Sometimes you have to take chances, and when that occurs, that's where you have to be on your game. But for the most part, there's a real safe way to play just about any hole.
I love that because, I so often I'll play with people and like, okay, all I got to do with this shot is XYZ. And it's like, curious, have you ever tried that shot before? Oh, no, I've seen it on TV all the time. So wait, you've never practiced it on the range? You've never even attempted it before? Nah, I got it. Like, okay, good luck. Have fun.
And And that's why that golfer's probably a higher handicap.
Yeah.
One thing that's consistent about good players is they really build skills before they get to the course. And so if I'm going to work on a shot, I'll probably hit it a couple thousand times before I'm going to go to the course and say, okay, now I'm going to hit that little swing, draw, checker thing, whatever it might be. You have to build it before you get there. And if you do, it just makes life better and easier. And it also makes practicing more fun. That's one of the benefits that my students have. You reach a point where you could pretty much take the swing and the skill for granted. So instead of working on technique all the time, they get to work on building shots. All right, what happens when I play the ball out of the back of my stance and I make the same swing? Oh, okay, it's got a little more spin on it and a different trajectory. And so they start to have the opportunity to become multi-dimensional golfers instead of just hitting one brand of shot throughout the course. And considering how difficult golf is and how every golf course, if there was only one golf course in the world, it's changing every day. It's changing every hour from the weather and the grass is growing. So you really have to be prepared with somewhat of an arsenal of shots to be able to go out and play. And so then you bring in the idea of, well, there's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of golf courses throughout the world. So imagine how many shots you're faced with there. And that's why it's just really, I think, a crucial part of any golfer's game is build your shots before you get to the course. If that's a bump and run, if it's a pitch, if it's a 3-foot putt, or if it's your stock swing, build it. And then when you get to the course, you don't have to worry about, how to do it or whether or not you can.
Let's take a time out. We'll be right back because I have so many more questions for you, Jimmy. This episode of Golf Smarter is brought to you by DynamicGolfers.com. I'm sure that the folks at Dynamic Golfers won't mind me sharing my latest round with you because there's no question that my daily 15 to 20 minute morning workouts with Dynamic Golfers have had a huge impact. Let's start with the fact that 4 of my last 5 rounds have been in the 70s. I've never been that consistent or confident. But this past Sunday was completely different in that it was truly the first time I've ever felt in control of what was happening during my game. Actually, I can recount only 4 bad shots I had during the round, but each time, except one, I was able to get up and down for par. The other time was on a par 3 over water that felt really great when the ball left the club. But unfortunately, there was a big headwind and the ball hit the edge of the bank and dribbled backwards into the water for my only double of the day. Otherwise, I had 2 birdies. I hit 11 fairways. I had 12 greens in regulation and 31 putts. So I ended up shooting 37-37, just 1 over on each side. So even though it was the 3rd time I've shot 74, what made it different was how comfortable I was, how smooth my rhythm felt, and how much in control and committed I felt over practically every shot. Was it all because of Dynamic Golfers? Of course not. I've been practicing with a purpose a lot lately. I was inspired by my recent interviews with Dr. Parent and today's Golf Smarter guest, Jim Venetos, and next week's guest sports psychologist, Dr. Bob Jones IV. Yes, Bobby Jones' grandson, who gave me one tip that blew my mind, and you'll have to hear that next week. And also, I went for a half-mile swim before the round. But through it all, the one constant, 2 constants were the lessons I've learned from Golf Smarter and my daily 15 to 20-minute morning workouts from Dynamic Golfers. So if you want to play better golf, focus on the most important tool in your bag, your body. For only $9.99 a month, that's less than a sleeve of balls. Join golfers worldwide that make Dynamic Golfers part of their daily routine. Go to dynamicgolfers.com/golfsmarter now and get a 7-day free trial and 15% off your membership when you check out using the coupon code GolfSmarter. Again, that's dynamicgolfers.com/golfsmarter. And remember to get the discount, enter GolfSmarter at checkout, and do it soon because this offer may not last. one of the greatest lessons that's for me, and feedback from listeners, especially as we went through 800 episodes, the feedback that one of the greatest lessons we've ever had on the show was never follow a bad shot with a stupid shot.
That's great advice.
And hearing what you just had to say about knowing, like if there's trouble on left and right, hit in front of it, or, clear it if you can. And I've found personally that if I'm going to clear it, there's a tendency to swing harder if you want to clear it. And that always creates a problem.
Well, swinging hard, I think, is something that plagues lots of golfers. The swing I teach doesn't require you to swing hard. Golfers swing hard because of a misperception, essentially, of how to create power and how to use the club properly. The club is a very dynamic tool. When used properly, you can do great things with it. And you've experienced it, even if you might not know. I think the general population of golfers really has no idea how the club actually works. And that's why a tour player or a pro or a high-level amateur golfer can use any swing style to create an effective shot. I could execute the traditional swing just fine. I just found flaw in it. And that comes down to this understanding of how to use the club. And it's something that often happens with golfers when they start the game very young. I started at 9 and was competitive by 10. So there becomes a lot of natural instincts that start to happen consciously and subconsciously. So the idea of understanding how to use the club properly is something that I think is often taught in traditional instruction in a very well-intended way. Most of what I hear in traditional instruction is how the club should move. And the club is here. Jack Nicklaus puts the club here, so you should put the club here. Tiger puts it here, you put it here. The problem is doing that becomes very difficult. If it was easy, then the average golfer would be pretty good. In the swing that I teach, what I do is I put you into a position so that if you stay within the parameters that I set, the club is forced to work properly. So then it becomes something that doesn't require you to have some great dexterity or golf athleticism or acumen for the game. It becomes something that's inevitable. If you set into the setup position that I teach and you focus on what I want you to focus on, the club will work properly. And once you experience it working properly, then you have a point of reference to be able to repeat that. And then that's the cycle that I try and build for my students, where I put them in a position where the club's going to work properly. Then they get to have that experience, just like you've had, of the effortless and powerful shot that felt so good and went exactly where you were looking. And then you ask yourself, how do I recreate that? Well, that's what I give my students. I give my students the opportunity to recreate it, because all they got to do is get into the same setup position, stay within the parameters that I set, and it'll happen again.
I can't remember if it's one of my favorite Jims, either Jim Venetos or Jim Waldron, who's once years ago talked about on the show how Tiger has no ego. And we're like, wait, what? It's like, because there's not a shot on the course that he will attempt that he hasn't worked on for thousands and thousands of swings, that he's not going to try something he knows he can't do. And again, we're talking years ago, but there, when you get to that level and you get the opportunity to play as much as they do and have as much coaching, but still for us, and this is what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about the tour. I'm talking about the weekend golfer, the guy who gets to play maybe a couple times a week or plays, once a month. People get, they have families, life gets in the way. They haven't played for 20 years. I got an email from a woman recently in Ireland who went away from the game for 20 years to raise her kids. And now she's coming back and she's got her goals set. But it just, just going out and hitting a ball or swinging a club, or if there's probably a difference there too. If you don't work on these smaller things, when you get out on the course, it's a completely different thing.
Well, that's one of my goals is I try and make the learning experience as quick as possible. Like you said, a Tiger or any competitive golfer, we dedicate our entire youth to playing the game. So you can't help but get a remarkable amount of quantity of time spent, from being 11, 12 years old and being dropped up at the golf course all day and just working around a chipping green until you're in college and you're playing, 9 rounds in a week. It's a remarkable quantity of golf that competitive golfers play. And that's why competitive golfers get so good. But the general population of golfers, they don't play that much golf, nor should they, nor should you. You have a life. You have this is a hobby for you. And so that's something that it's pretty much the reason why I teach, is because I figured out a way to give you guys the fast track so that you don't have to put in all the work that I put in. I looked under all the rocks. I did all the research and was able to execute traditional swing and then still found flaw in it. And as I then went through my climbing of the mountain of how to play great golf, I found a faster path for other people to be able to climb that same mountain. And over 27 years of teaching, I'd say that's the biggest difference. From day one, I've taught the same system. This is what my mind understands for the golf swing and the putting stroke and the long game, short game, and putting. But it's been, how do I get this person up that mountain of how to play great golf quicker? And that's been my big goal. And that's where my message is I've tried to evolve it so that you can benefit from the work that I've done. I think Socrates is a beautiful quote talking about how you should read another man's work so that you can benefit from all the time that they put into it, and you can have a faster experience to reaching that understanding and that consciousness. And that's what I try and do, is I try and reach down and pull you up the fastest route so that you don't have to go through what I went through, or you don't have to go through what you're going through. Golf's a difficult game. And if there is a quick route, then gosh, if I was a general population of golfers, I'd want to be the first one on that route to figure it out. And that's really been my big goal. And it's crazy. I take great pride not in keeping students, but graduating them and getting them to the point where they don't need me. And I'm finding that becomes faster and faster. And it's a beautiful thing. I don't want them to need me. I want them to have that complete understanding for themselves so that I can go help someone else.
But like I started playing in my 40s, right? You started when you were young. It's just a natural thing for you. It came, I don't know if it came easy, but you also worked really, really hard at it. And developed past traditional teaching and had the epiphany and were able to move forward. Is it easier for you to teach because of that ability, or does it make it more difficult to communicate that information to people who are new or don't get it?
Well, it wasn't easy for me. I would call myself a pretty, talented athlete. I could play any sport. I could play it well. I could win championships at it, just like many people that are listening right now. There are lots of things that people can get really good at. And when I took up golf, I took it up just because my dad went to go play golf. And I thought, what's golf? I want to go with you. And it was difficult. And I found that because I didn't have like a natural instinct or a talent for the game, my mind was processing it differently. For example, when I was taught how to shoot a basketball, there was a very simple mechanical way that was based upon the geometry of your anatomy to be able to shoot the ball. And there is a paradigm that is a universal paradigm for how to shoot a basketball. And there's lots of universal paradigms for lots of things in other sports. But in golf, it was sort of like everybody had to find their own way. And I always found that to be quite difficult. Now, because I was tenacious and I loved the game and I pursued playing it at a high level, and also got to grow up in Southern California. So I was playing against Tiger and Phil Mickelson in my youth. That's just who that pool of kids were. I learned from not only my experiences, but the people that I played with and watching them. And one of the things that I realized in my 20s, when I was playing Division I college golf, I would see golfers get off the ladder, my teammates or other guys that I'm competing against, they would get off the ladder of learning once they got to a point where what they had, they felt was good enough to go play at the highest level. So they would, for example, one of my very best friends who made it to the nationwide tour, I could hit a lot more shots than him, but he was disciplined enough to stay within his game and only hit the shots that he wanted to play throughout a course. And with that mindset, he can go out and win professional tournaments and set course records and play beautiful golf. But he'd also always be pretty frustrated because there were shots that he couldn't hit. And he just had to be disciplined enough to not try to hit those shots and stay within his game, like we were talking about, which is an important thing. So I always found that traditional golf didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And so I kept climbing this ladder of of learning and understanding the swing. And by continuing to climb the ladder, I would see my buddies, they get off the ladder and they go out and they qualify for some big event or they win some tournament. Well, I kept climbing the ladder and I climbed it until I reached this place that was really interesting to me. It was like this meadow and this plateau where everything got easy. And it wasn't because I was better. It was because I just kept searching and searching. My college teammates used to say, and I don't remember saying this, but one of them recently told me, you would always say there must be a better way. And I don't remember thinking that way, but I can understand why I would have said that. Because the traditional swing I always found to be just had flaw in it. You know, I could execute it just fine. I can go out and shoot under par with it, but it had limitations to it. And so for me, I just kept climbing and trying to understand the swing. And then when I started to teach, that's when it really cracked wide open for me. Because I wasn't working with people with talent. I wasn't working with people with experience. I was working with golfers that play once or twice a week and probably were anywhere from 10 to 30 handicaps. And so it is through them that I started to learn how beneficial my understanding was. I climbed this ladder all the way to the top because I needed to. Well, the general population needed that information. And so that's what I started teaching, is this understanding of stillness and not having to manage movements during the swing and presetting the movements in the setup position so that you can have a reliable swing. And so I think that's true of many things in life, where because of your failure, you keep learning and growing until you get to a place of maybe a stronger understanding. And I think that's what I went through. So for me to be able to teach the general population, I get very excited about it because I love giving you guys the gift of being able to play the game good. I sort of feel like it's a bit of a fountain of youth. And I want you to grab your cup and come get a drink because it's there for you.
I can't believe we've quoted Socrates on Golf Smarter. I'm going to take another time out. We'll be right back. I hope COVID wasn't difficult for you. I hope that you survived it well. But it seems like the lifestyle that you've given yourself on teaching remotely and living bi-coastal and not getting in airplanes to get there, did you do okay?
Thankfully, I couldn't be more grateful to be on this side of the pandemic. That was quite an experience, and I just want to say thank you to anybody out there that's a frontline worker or was involved with supporting us through this all. You know, this is a very important time for us all to come together, not just as a country, but as a humanity. And it just feels, I'm very thankful and grateful to be on this side of it. And it was actually very good for golf. You know, it was very fun to see I mean, I always, as I do my teaching, I receive videos from my students and I make an analysis. And it's true that I do get to see a little bit of their lives. And usually it's on a driving range. But during the pandemic, it was a lot of backyards, a lot of basements, a lot of garages, and a lot of, golfers just trying to get better and figuring out ways to work on their games. And it was a very powerful thing because you could see, we're all stuck in this spot. We're all when we were on lockdown, but yet everybody was figuring out a way to continue on and make themselves happy and try to survive and even thrive during it. And I had a lot of very positive experiences with golfers being able to focus their attention on learning. For me, it was great because I always want my students to work on fundamentals. Well, if you're in your basement and all you can do is hit a bump and run or a small chip shot, you're working on fundamentals. So it was a really strong thing where the pandemic actually forced students to be better students because they couldn't just go out and play. They couldn't go out and work on driver. So they had to work on more fundamentals. And ironically, it benefited them. And lot of success. I got to see a lot of success in the students through that lockdown period. And it was kind of a forced yet beneficial thing.
Yeah, absolutely want to reiterate our gratitude towards those frontline workers and everybody who helped us get through that. But I also want to give my thoughts and prayers to everybody who suffered from a family member or themselves. David, talking to you, that made it through and struggled and went through a lot of turmoil and pain and put their family through a lot to get through it. And I did get an email from a listener who said that Golf Smarter and the Golf Channel helped him get through it. And he had 2 bouts, spent time in the hospital. And I've been communicating with him and so grateful he's okay now. So, yeah.
No doubt and amen to
tough
that.
Time.
Tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was playing with somebody. A little too emotional about this. I was playing with someone recently and he said, there's 2 types of golfers. Someone who hits the ball and someone who swings the club. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Oh gosh. What was the handicap of the guy that said that?
This guy's won club championships. He's now in his early 80s and he still can hit the ball beautifully. But,
I'm guessing the swinging of the club was what he was referencing as better. And that's something that I know.
I don't know. He didn't put a judgment on either one, because he said the person the third we were playing with, he hits the ball, you swing the club. And I didn't know what he was referencing as better.
I think he was complimenting you because it is a golf swing. And that's what I was talking about earlier with using the club properly. You can allow the club to swing and create an abundance of power. But a lot of golfers try to hit at the ball, which is why you had said earlier, when you see trouble, you start to swing harder to try and carry that trouble instead of just allowing the club to swing. It's one thing where, because I teach a system that asks you to stay still and asks you not to swing hard, I'm actually asking you to let the club swing. And I think a lot of traditional instruction tells you how to hit. It's a lot of go, 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 accelerate, faster, faster. That's one of the more common, one of the more recent, I think, negative trends to golf is this whole idea of swing faster and speed training. There's a few swing aids that are out right now, and the whole purpose of them is to teach you how to swing faster. And
increase your club head speed, I think, is the terminology they're using, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Sure. Yeah. But then I ask you to increase your club head speed too, but I ask you to do it by swinging the club on a proper swing path, as opposed to just hurling the club at the ball. There's a big difference there. True power, and this is why pros are able to swing very effortlessly in a majority, true power comes from swinging the club on a proper swing path, not swinging it hard. If you swing it on a proper swing path, it will build energy and speed into the ball as it should and when it should. If you try to swing hard, what usually happens is the energy all starts at the top of the backswing, and then it's diminished by the time you get down to the ball. But if you can learn how to swing a club properly, it will build energy just like a pendulum does. It'll build energy as it reaches the bottom of its arc. And the bottom of the arc is where the ball's at. And that's where you want your energy to be built into. So the swinging of the club and hitting of the ball, that's definitely, I can see where he would be talking about that. And I think he's giving you a compliment. It's a golf swing, not a golf hit. And I think that golfers should try to allow, and notice I say allow the club to swing as opposed to make the club swing.
I do not like to make suggestions, give people advice, especially during a round of golf. And plus, I'm in no position to be doing that, although I seem to have had this graduate education on golf instruction by talking to so many instructors. But I do notice a lot of people that it's like, you're trying to lift the ball. Let the club do the work. You're trying to make the ball do something. And just remember that the striking, the contact between the ball and the club is the middle part of your swing. That's not the goal. Am I wrong?
No, you're definitely correct. And what I hear you saying is that people have a misinterpretation of how to advance the ball. I don't think golfers want to do it wrong. It's just this idea, if you watched a PGA Tour golfer and you see all the club head speed that's built in the swing and how fast the club is going, you then have a conscious or a subconscious instinct that wants to go after it too and try and do whatever your perception for the swing is. You try and impart that. So you want to hit the ball high, you might think that you have to hoist it into the air, but that's not how the club works, and that's not how the club meets the ball to do that. So it becomes this misperception and this misunderstanding of simply how the club works. If I could step inside your skin and make a swing, you would look at me and say, really, it's that simple. And then you'd have a point of reference to be able to repeat it. Unfortunately, I can't do that, which is why I try to create in my school, I create a format and a template, and I set parameters for you. So it's almost like you're stepping inside of my skin. And then once you experience that action, that is something that you never thought would have happened. It's why you've never looked there before. You've always tried, not you, but the general population tries to swing too hard, tries to hit up on it, tries in a very well-intended way to advance the ball. Well, that's just all based on this misunderstanding of how the club works. So once you experience how the club works, it's pretty easy to start to replicate it because you have a point of reference. And then with the swing that I teach, you have a template and a form to set into that will help to force that occurrence, provided you stay within the parameters that I set.
Wow. I love talking to you, and we're going to continue doing it after this. Prepare yourself to laugh out loud this week with Golf Smarter Mulligans number 117 as we bring back a truly entertaining conversation that was only heard by those who subscribed to Golf Smarter for members only back in those days. This episode from January 2009 features the hilarious and always self-deprecating former tour pro and CBS TV analyst Gary McCord. As an announcer, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, as an announcer, there's not really many golfers. When I started in '86, they were all professional announcers, and they were all very good. And, they had their place in announcing society, and if there were golfers there, they were very good players. So here comes this guy that's just, couldn't play a lick, and he's loud and obnoxious from Southern California. And, and I remember asking Pat Summerall, I said, Pat, I don't know what to be in this team here. What do I do? And he looked at me and he goes, why don't you just try to be yourself? He said, that should be pretty easy. And I went, okay. So I just kind of was myself. I didn't try to be an actor playing a role. I just trying to be myself. That's the best advice I got.
That's Gary McCord this week on episode 117 of Golf Smarter Mulligans, being released this Friday. Both Golf Smarter and Golf Smarter Mulligans are available from where you're listening to this podcast right now. Please subscribe and follow both so that you can get a brand new episode of either when it downloads to your favorite listening device. Based on what we're talking about here, I'm actually curious to know, and I don't talk about the tour. I do like to talk about players and what they're doing for the game and to the game. And there's been a lot of conversation about Bryson DeChambeau, and the amount of power that he generates, the amount of distance that he gets. And I'm not going to say it's power he generates. He's built his body up to have more power, but he hits the ball a long way, and he has a lot of control of it. But is he a meteor that's flashing through the sky, or is it going to be the sunlight that's going to be there for a long time, compared to someone like a Colin Morikawa, who, just solid every single shot right there. I'm curious on your thoughts about what players like those two players, to me, who are on extreme ends, are doing for the future of the game.
Well, any golfer that's playing at those levels, on the highest levels, even I'd say the top 2,000 golfers in the world, men and women, all have a very remarkable skill. They have a coordination. They have an acumen. They are golf athletes. So I think just about anybody on tour could swing hard like Bryson DeChambeau and be able to play and get a relatively similar amount of power and be able to play the game that way. But I believe that how you play the game should be personal to you. So I believe that we should all use the same swing style, specifically the one that I teach, because I think it's simple and it produces really great dynamics.
What a surprise.
Yeah. But I also think that we should all play the game according to our personality, ourselves. So if you're a person that is more conservative in life, you don't like to take chances, then you shouldn't try and cut corners, and you shouldn't try and hit shots through trees, because that's not really where you're at your most comfortable. Now, if you are a person that likes to take chances and be aggressive, then you should probably not play too conservatively. I feel very comfortable playing an aggressive brand of golf. There's a time and a place where you got to play conservatively, but if the shot is there for me, I'm going to go for it. So for a guy like Bryson DeChambeau, I think he's playing a brand of golf that he feels very comfortable playing. Now, should everybody subscribe to it, and should it be something where a general population of golfers should say, I'm going to play like Bryson DeChambeau? Not in the sense of how he plays the game, but in the sense that he's decided to play the game according to how he feels comfortable. I think that's what you can learn from the different tour players. They're all remarkable golfers, and they all can shoot great scores under many different circumstances, and they can do it consistently. But one of the things that they have to build within themselves is the discipline to play the game how they see it. And so you have some golfers out there, like, you remember, like a Hunter Mahan would hit the same shot over and over again. He'd play a more one-dimensional game. Tiger, at his best, played a very multi-dimensional game. Bubba Watson, multi-dimensional. You see these different, and you can break it down into many different levels of how they go about playing their game. So I think the best thing that the general population can learn is trying to play according to your skill set and where you feel most comfortable. As a philosophy major in college, mostly because I really enjoyed the concepts of it, but it was also because of this. Know thyself. I thought if I knew myself, I would play better golf. And that was just something when I was 18, 19, that I wanted to, that was my goal, is to play competitive golf at the highest level. So I was going to do everything I could to achieve that. Part of it was being a philosophy major so that I can understand myself more. And I think part of being a philosophy major is that you question things. Socrates was sentenced to death because he asked why. So that's something that I think also allowed me to break free from the traditional system, is I asked why. In the traditional swing, when a golf instructor, and this is something that's good for your audience, one of the things that's very hard for, I think, the general population to do is to choose an instructor. Most golfers are not qualified enough to even know who would be a good instructor for them. So in that, I think some guidelines that you can use is to ask why. If a golf instructor asks you to do something, ask why. And if you don't get a scientific and logical response, for example, why I ask my students to preset the movements for the swing so that they could focus on stillness and create a shallow circular and descending swing is so that they can have ease of performance, low stress on the body, and be able to produce the highest quality ball flight dynamics. And it's all in a scientific and logical basis. I mean, I'm stricken with it because of being a philosophy major. Logic is very important to me. So it's something that as you're trying to, if you're a golfer and you're trying to figure out who would be a good instructor for you, I think the best thing you could do is when a golf instructor tells you to do something, ask them why. And if you're not hearing a very clear, logical, scientific explanation of it, if it's, well, that's just because that's the way it is, or that's golf, or, like I had an instructor who was one of the top instructors in the world, who I'm hitting balls in a lesson, and I'm hitting these smoked 2-yard fades. And he says, what do you think of that? I said, well, I don't like it. I'm trying to hit a 2-yard draw. And he said, well, what if you tried to hit a 2-yard draw and anticipated a 2-yard fade? Now, I can't do that. There's nothing logical about that. But basically what he was saying is, I like the shot that you're hitting. And if you have to press a different button to make that shot occur, go ahead and press that button. Now, I understand why he would say that. He's saying try to hit a draw and expect a 2-yard fade. But for me, if I try to hit a draw, I want to see a draw. If I want to hit a fade, I want to see that fade. I want it to have a logical basis for me. And I think a lot of golf instruction, and that's because, the game is difficult, and the swing itself is a pretty complex dynamic. I think they start to give a little too much freedom in the intangible nature of a lot of instruction. Do this just because. Well, just because why? And I think a lot of golfers can really benefit from just asking that simple question of why? Why do you want me to swing faster? What will that benefit for me? If I try and swing hard, won't that hurt my body? If I try and swing hard, won't it make it difficult to be repetitive? And, as great as Bryson DeChambeau is, he does swing hard, and it is a little difficult to be consistent when you have that kind of, I don't want to say aggression, but when you have that volume of a swing, you now are bringing in some variables that could make it difficult to be consistent.
I'm so glad that you said that you're a philosophy major. That puts everything together for me. It's like, oh, okay, now I get it. That's it. Have you ever read Homer Kelly's The Golfing Machine?
Oh, sure.
What do you think of that? I mean, it seems to me that's where Bryson went with all this, but fascinating story. Fascinating.
Whenever a golf instructor or golf instruction talks about the movements of the swing, they lose me. Because I believe in cause and effect. So the movements of the swing are happening because of a cause. I want to know the cause, not the effect. The movements are the effect. What's the cause? What's the source? What will allow me to do that competitively? So a lot of golf books that were, when I was growing up, it was VCR tapes and books. Literature is the only way that you can learn. And so I read everything I could get my hands on. Golf Magazine, Golf Digest, all of it. I'm trying to take it all in. I'm trying to make sense of it. And what I learned is if it was based in movement, you have to kind of raise your eyebrow because that's very difficult to repeat. But if it has something that you could talk about the source of how it happens, Setup is everything. That's one of the things that they say in even traditional golf. Setup is everything. Well, then the setup should be something that presets the movements for the swing. But the first thing they teach you to do in traditional golf is to move. And so whatever setup position that you're in, the first thing is an action of movement. And that action of movement becomes difficult to repeat. And so anytime I hear of any kind of instruction that's referencing movement, I always want to challenge that instructor to go farther and find out what is the cause of that movement. Sure. That's how Tiger's club is traveling throughout the swing. But why? What's causing it to do that? And I think once you understand what causes it to do it, then you have something that's pretty powerful. And that's what I've learned, just as a silent witness. I never set out to try and revolutionize golf instruction or redefine the game. What I learned was based upon years and years of trying to find something for myself that would allow me to play at the highest level. I was surprised when I started teaching and it started to apply to all my students. A guy that plays once a week, little old lady, little old man, kids, middle-aged guy, really athletic golfer, not so athletic golfer. Everybody was able to execute what it was that I was teaching. And that's when it made me realize, maybe I have something here that could be beneficial to golfers so that they don't have to struggle so much anymore. And that's why I pursued teaching. Initially, I was just teaching to support myself so that I could play competitively. I was just looking for that income so that I could go play for my tournament. But after 7 years of teaching maybe 1,000 people, I realized, this worked for everybody. Everybody's able to hit a solid, tight draw within a few minutes of the first lesson, all because of this preset form that I'm putting people in that's based upon the geometry of your anatomy relative to the task at hand. And so that's why I continued teaching after 7 years and pursued trying to deliver this message on a larger scale. It's really just because it works.
Oh, and does it? And you can find more about how it works and get there yourself by going to jimvenetosgolfacademy.com, and it's V as in Victor, Enetos, Jim Venetos. And also, there's a wealth of information on your YouTube channel. It's a spectacular YouTube channel. And I mean, we talked about all the different ways that you can go down rabbit holes, especially on YouTube, but yours is the one that needs to be. I mean, like if people are going to subscribe to a YouTube channel, there's a couple, and yours is definitely one of them.
Oh, I'm honored that you would say that. Thank you, Fred.
Oh, I absolutely believe that. Although you did drive me crazy with the juggling of the ball on the wedge. That video, it's like, oh, really? It's that easy, huh?
Well, that's an indicator of spending far too much time playing tournament golf and 6-hour rounds. That's where that comes from.
Man, I watched that a couple times and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go. My forearm was hurting and it's like, I'm trying too hard. I could never do the paddle ball thing. I mean, I was never good at that.
Well, it takes time. I'm sure if I could go back to when I first started juggling a golf ball, I probably wasn't very good either. But just like anything in life, if you dedicate to it, you'll progress at it. The whole thing that I think is good about juggling a golf ball, I reference it like spinning a basketball on your finger. It's not necessary to be a great basketball player, but it's a pretty good indicator that you got a good sense of how the club and the ball work and the weight of it and just the feel for it and how the mannerisms of your body should be. You really have to relax your shoulders, arms, and hands. And that's how I swing a club too.
Jim, great to talk to you. Welcome back. So good to have you on. 10th time. Who knows how many more? Hopefully many.
Thank you, Fred, and I wish you 800 more episodes.
Hey, Fred. Cody Hale, Director of Tour Operations with Seymour Putter Company. Hey, we just wanted to congratulate you on reaching an incredible milestone for Golf Smarter Podcast, episode 800. It's incredible. We appreciate your support throughout the years and look forward to our continued friendship and being on the podcast and talking potting again.
You're well aware that there are so many content directions that I take the podcast in, and your feedback is as to what you like hearing is always helpful. But for me, I really enjoy talking to instructors about putting and the mental game, course management, but there's nothing like hearing great stories. Not sure why, but golf movies don't usually succeed the same ways as, say, boxing or baseball movies do. But reading or hearing great golf stories about inspirational people are magical. And we've got all that coming up over the next few weeks. Next week on episode 802, we'll feature a clinical and sports psychologist who's also part of golf royalty. Dr. Bob Jones IV, grandson of legendary Bobby Jones. Before the recording, he told me that he's pretty much been asked every question under the sun, but I honestly believe I got him to go places that were unique in his memories of his grandfather, whom he affectionately referred to as Bub. We'll follow that up with a return visit by Josh Zander, who will provide information that will inspire and inform you on taking your game to the next level. And in that conversation with Josh, he suggested that I speak to Bruce Ririck on the podcast. He said that not only is Bruce one of the greatest putting instructors alive today, but he's an incredible storyteller. So how's that for a twofer? Well, let me say that I recorded the episode today, and Bruce shares 15 years worth of fabulous stories from the time he worked for Arnold Palmer. Bruce said that every time he played with AP, or Mr. Palmer, he was required to tell his dad. So according to Bruce's father's count, they played more than 400 rounds together. It's a great conversation, a wonderful guy. And yes, we got into putting instruction like the likes that I've never heard before. All that's coming up each week this summer on the Golf Smarter podcast. Please follow at Golf Smarter on social media and subscribe to Golf Smarter TV on YouTube to hear our podcasts and watch unique golf videos. Golf Smarter is your podcast for caddy. And like your caddies, tips are accepted for services provided when you click on donate at golfsmarter.com.